Good afternoon, everyone. We're back to another Carbon Talk, as you know, promoted by Food for Sustainability and Grow, a gathering that takes place every Thursday to introduce topics that are relevant to farmers. It is a great pleasure to welcome you and our speakers to this forum in pushing forward an agenda that the planet urges to consider carefully. So it's a great start that we are all here together to join this debate. Today, we will be following from last year's, apologies, not that long ago, but last week discussion where we talked about policy orientations and evidence-based research on carbon removals and mitigations. And we'll continue to discuss how carbon markets in agriculture and achieving net zero emissions are intertwined to reach mitigation goals. So as we have seen in the past session, on one hand, we have farmers that need to be incentivized to adopt sustainable practices. And one way to do this is through additional revenue streams. We approach this. But also, as we've seen, this is a very complex process, namely because of issues of accuracy and verification. But we also discussed the potential for carbon offset projects that prioritize profits over genuine emission reductions. So we will continue this debate today, this time with a more applied focus. So ladies and gentlemen and fellow enthusiasts of sustainable agriculture, it is with great pleasure that we are joined by three distinguished speakers, each bringing together unique perspectives and, of course, expertise to enrich our discussions. So let's give a warm welcome to Ryan McGuire, Shannon McLaughlin, and Alfred Grand. And just for you to know what is coming ahead, let me just unveil a little bit of what is following. So Ryan McGuire is a research fellow at the School of Biological Science, Queen's University in Belfast. And Ryan is specialized in agriculture research, particularly focusing on the intersection between sustainable farming practices and carbon sequestration. With his expertise in biological sciences, Ryan explores innovative methods to enhance carbon capture in agriculture systems, making him, of course, a valuable voice in discussions around carbon markets and their implementation in farming communities. We also have the pleasure to have with us Shannon McLaughlin. She is a researcher at the Institute for Global Food Security. Shannon's work revolves around understanding the complex relationships between food production and environmental sustainability. Shannon's research delves into how carbon markets can incentivize farmers to adopt good practice that not only improve food security, but also mitigate carbon emissions. So Shannon will be bridging this gap between food security and environmental concerns. And of course, these are very important contributions to our conversation here today. And we also have the pleasure today to be joined by Alfred Grand. Alfred is an organic farmer and an entrepreneur from Austria. And Alfred's first-hand experience as an organic farmer and entrepreneur will provide a practical perspective on the challenges and opportunities associated with carbon markets in agriculture. And we will know more about his innovative farming techniques and, of course, his view on the role of farmers in shaping the future of carbon markets and hopefully the agriculture industry as a whole. It's really a pleasure to have you here all. I hope you enjoy, and there's plenty of reasons for you to stay until the end. And as we move on, let me just remind you two of the rules of our webinars. So our webinars are recorded. So if you're not comfortable, I just kindly ask you to remain with your cameras off. We will also address your questions to our speakers. Your questions are very, very welcome. We will use the chat here on Teams and Slido to read your questions and ensure that they get to our speakers. So please come forward, join the debates. It makes things much more rich and interesting. So, Slido, Rita, have we prepared Slido for our guests today? Yes, Rita is nodding. So I will invite you all to jump on Slido. So Rita has just put up the Slido. So www.slido.com, or you can just more easily, probably for some of you, not all, to scan this QR code. You will be entering the Slido page, and then you have a hashtag box. You just need to insert the code F4S Academy, and you should be in. Let me do the same so that I'm on the same page as you are. You have two tabs. Once you are in, you have the Q&A tab where you can post your questions. Remind you that this is there is a limit in terms of characters, but use the chat here in Teams if you prefer. And then we have polls. Polls is where Rita has prepared some surprise for us. So, and the first question is, one tradable credit, a carbon credit, is equivalent to how many tons of CO2 reduced, sequestered, or avoided? So this is a conversion unit between one carbon credit and the amount of CO2 sequestered. Let's see if everyone knows what this relationship is. Okay, so we have here a big consensus. So I think we are knowledgeable about this topic. This is actually a very straightforward conversion. One carbon credit is equivalent to 1 ton of CO2 reduced, sequestered, or avoided. Thank God we don't need to get into our calculator to do these very fancy calculations, translating one metrics to the other one. So this is fairly straightforward. One credit unit, 1 ton of CO2. Thank you so much, Rita, for this. Can we move to the next one? And this one relates to the percentage of greenhouse gas emissions that can be offsetted by incorporating agroforestry systems instead of using the conventional agriculture. Do you know how many offsets can be achieved by changing farming practice, namely from conventional farming practices to agroforestry systems? So agroforestry, it's actually a traditional farming practice and also an effective carbon farming method. And it helps to remove CO2 from the atmosphere, namely via the biomass, and store CO2 in the form of organic carbon. Do you have an idea of the percentage? I know this is a tough one. I'll wait for you to vote. Okay, we have a winner. 45% is really a very nice and round number, but studies indicate that the potential of comparing these two systems and to change to agroforestry can offset 53% of the emissions from conventional agriculture systems. So it's quite a difference. Again, these numbers actually highlight to the importance of looking at farming practices. So 53% would be the correct answer. Thank you. And I'm sure that our speakers will shed some more light into this topic. Organic matter. Organic matter is actually a big concern for Portuguese farmers in Portugal. We are all struggling for more organic matter. A question is, just a 1% increase in soil organic matter can store how many tons of carbon per hectare? So on average, if we achieve an increase of 1% in soil organic matter, in Portugal, this is actually quite an achievement already. But do you have an idea? Let's wait for your votes. Let's wait for your votes. Okay, I think we have everyone. Just, yeah, we have a tie there, 5 and 25 tons, too little, too much. 10 tons is pushing ahead. Okay, so just on average, and according to the latest figures, 1% increase in soil organic matter can indeed store up to 10 tons of carbon per hectare. So 10 tons of carbon per hectare if we manage to increase soil organic matter just 1%. So let's try to see if we know how to increase organic matter in 1%. Okay, this was great. Thank you so much for taking part in Slido. I hope you have enjoyed. Uh, so now it's time to start and to hear our speakers. So I will start to invite Ryan McGuire to the stage. Ryan is a farmer and offers both academic and practical experience in this field. He will be primarily discussing the Food Futures project, which saw the co-creation of a sustainability tool with the food industry and farmers in Northern Ireland. And the tool offers farmers a way that allows them to measure the economic, environment, and social sustainability of their own farm. So, Ryan, it is a pleasure to have you here. Thank you very much. Can I share your screen, and the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Claudia. Has that come through okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
All good.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Great pleasure to be here. So as Claudia said, I will be speaking about a project that I've been working on for around 5 years now, which is all centered on MRV of farm sustainability, measure, report, and verify farm sustainability. So in around 2018, using Northern Ireland livestock farmers as a case study, we had the aim of creating something digital that farmers could use on their farm on a daily basis, something that they could use on their phone. So a digital app that would allow them to utilize the vast amounts of data we have on livestock systems in Northern Ireland across environment, social and economic aspects. So the tool was aimed to be created to drive nature positivity in farm performance, but also to increase production. So we didn't set out as the environmental police. We wanted to increase production, increase productivity, whilst being environmentally regenerative and protecting farm and family well-being, all through the easy use of an app on a farmer's phone through high quality data collections. So a bit of background about the tool in terms of its merit. So the underlying science of the tool, which was effectively my job, all the metrics and indicators that we used, which I will describe in the next slide, was centered on around 150 peer-reviewed academic papers. So there is a lot more, but there's a core group of 150 peer-reviewed scientific articles that we used to create the backbone of this tool. So obviously wide consultation with the scientific community. But as I said, and as Claudia correctly said, it was co-created with industry, with government and with our farmers. And that's what makes the tool just slightly unique in that it becomes feasible. And we tested it with farmers over a 4-year period. The end goal was a two-way digital dashboard, which is now fully functional and operational. So I'll come to that in a moment. So the science behind this was to create metrics and indicators that reflect environmental, economic, and social sustainability at farm level. In total, we had around 20 or just over 20 metrics, and within each metric, you have underlying indicators, 115 in total. So it's quite comprehensive in its construction, but it's mainly the metrics the farmer gets to focus on. So around 20 of those in total. The metrics include your no-brainers, your soil health, carbon LCA, biodiversity, profitability on the farm, farm health and safety, etc., etc. when we set out, we were very lucky to have 30 ambassador farmers across the country working with us. They are distributed on the little figure on the left-hand side. So good geographical distribution, compromising dairy, beef, sheep, and mixed farming systems. On the top right, you can see my boss here at Queen's speaking to those farmers in one of the many workshops and focus groups that we held with these farmers as we were co-creating this tool. So there's a lot of moving parts to this tool, and it's been in the works for a lot of years. So just to sum up, it's primarily composed of 4 steps. One is data collection that can either be primary on-farm surveys, which will always be necessary. I know secondary data and AI is taken off, but we will always need on-farm surveys and secondary data sets, whether that be lab results on soil health, or whether that be a separate carbon assessment or carbon audit the farmer has completed that is ISO and IPCC accredited. We can use those secondary data sets too. Once that data is accepted, it gets automatically analyzed by the systems against the metrics and indicators I was speaking about earlier. So each farm gets analyzed and assessed and measured across each metric and each indicator based on the data that's coming through and being accepted by the system. That delivers an output, which I'll show you very soon. But with the output becomes a very important KE. So each farm for each metric gets an important knowledge exchange from ourselves as to how to improve for each metric and each indicator. And then the final one is ourselves continuously checking for any errors. So this is a quick snapshot of the tool using proxy data. On the left-hand side of the screen, you can see 4 main options. The first 2 are dashboard and performance, which is what's in front of you. So at the top, you can see the 3 dimensions: economic, environmental, and social, giving an overall score using red, amber, green. Below that, you can see each metric outlined and how the farm has performed across each metric: waste, slurry manure management, energy, spreading, greenhouse gases and ammonia, etc., etc. The thick horizontal bar represents where the farm is performing, so that's the actual score out of 100%. But just below that, you can see the dashed line, which is what we call a benchmark. So how the farm is performing in that metric relevant to colleagues in the sector. So what is the group average for sheep? What is the group average for beef and dairy in that specific metrics? And how am I performing against that? You'll see priorities on the left-hand side, which basically allows the farmer to focus on the 4 main metrics of importance for his or her dashboard. So there's so many metrics and indicators here. Priorities is just a chance for the farmer to click on that and go, okay, this is where my problem is, and this is where the urgency is. Scenarios is another dashboard, but it's scenario testing. So it allows the farmer to look at the actual results they have and play around with the dashboard based on hypothetical decisions they might implement, whether it be increased soil testing, lowering phosphorus levels, whatever the case may be, to mitigate poor environmental performance. They can do that in a hypothetical scenario through the scenarios option. So this journey of this project, as I said, began in 2018, finished around 2022, although we still work with these farmers. So they were absolutely instrumental, the original 30, in co-creating this tool. So just some quick results at a very high level, because we don't have much time, on how these 30 farmers perform. So on the left-hand side, simple pie chart really on the results of the carbon LCA. So the dairy farmers averaged around 1.2 kilograms of CO2 being emitted per litre of milk produced. So that's your basic emissions intensity. That's pretty much average for UK and for Irish dairy farmers, pretty much the entire Western Europe, to be honest. So that's pretty much average. 43 kilograms of CO2 equivalent emitted per kilogram of beef. That's high. That is high. And the problem there was we did not differentiate between the different beef enterprises that were being used, and they fluctuate. So it doesn't tell the very true story of what each specific enterprise was emitting in the beef side. On the mixed, around 23 kilograms of CO2 emitted per kilogram of meat produced, which is pretty much average for a mixed system. On the right-hand side, you can see all the environmental metrics and economic metrics coming together for dairy, beef, and mixed systems, and the overall percentage score. So quite similar, actually. So on the dairy side, 34% an average score across all metrics and 28 for economics. 33 on the beef environmental, and 36 on the mixed environmental. That is quite low, and it was supposed to be like that. This is not a tool that was easy on the management system, even though it was co-created with farmers. It was very much a holistic and demanding tool, and the baseline score, which is effectively that in front of you, was always going to be challenging. And they have improved since then, but it's just to give you an indication of the challenge that this tool poses to our farmers to improve their sustainability performance. So we held several focus groups after that, and quite a lot of investment and management decisions are being made. This is just a quick summary of the things these 30 farmers are telling us. Lots of planting of trees and hedgerows to improve biodiversity, soil health, and of course net zero carbon. Lots of investment in LESE, low emission slurry spreading techniques, again to mitigate carbon, but also ammonia, and much more frequent soil sampling to keep a much closer eye on those key soil health and soil carbon metrics. So that was the 30, but in 2022, the summer of 2022, at the bottom of the screen, we had the chance to do another pilot away from the 30 farms nationwide through what we call the Farm Quality Assurance Scheme, which is a nationwide scheme, signature scheme here in Northern Ireland for farm assurance food. We rolled this out commercially in the summer of 2022. Voluntarily, 162 farmers participated through the FQA scheme in just a 3-month period. So really good uptake of farmers getting involved. Very quickly on some of the initial results. So on slurry storage, 86% stored slurry below surface, so your typical slurry tank. And there is a misconception that many believe that is quite a negative way to store slurry. It's not, in terms of ammonia at least. It's the mixing and the spreading that can cause the issue. So for this metric only, that's not a bad score when 86% are storing the slurry below ground, and then respectively 7% were storing the slurry above ground, which is the ideal way when it's sufficiently covered. In relation to spreading, it is 62% spread via the splash plate and around 30% via band spreading, whether that's the trailing shoe or the dribbling bar, which for ourselves here in Northern Ireland is the best way to spread the slurry, and not by shallow injection, just due to the nature of our soil. So around 45% of these 162 farms do take regular soil samples at least once every 5 years, whilst the remaining farms either not take any samples at all or not very frequently. Days to pasture became a really important metric for us for a number of reasons, not just in terms of animal welfare and performance, but also in terms of ammonia emissions, greenhouse gas emissions, and soil health and pasture. So the average days to pasture for these farms was around 6 months, which is really good. The shortest period was around 61 days in County Down, and the longest was 304 in County Tyrone. So again, a relatively good performance for this metric. 22% of the farms had a biodiversity plan in place. That came from the agri-environmental scheme that our government here has set up. And around 25% of the farms use pesticides, mostly from the larger intensive dairy farms. Economic and efficiency metrics, 18% of the farms were included in some financial benchmarking. A quick binary question we asked the farmers: would your farm be profitable without subsidy? 30% said yes. That was nearly all dairy farms that said yes to the farm being profitable without subsidies. And then was the health plan, your livestock health plan, reviewed by a vet with evidence? Around 83% were able to deliver that. Some on the social side, first aid kits available on the farm, really high, 85%. We asked them again a binary question: were you unable to take regular time off? 35% said yes, which is high, very high for any sector, not just agriculture. And do you have a succession plan in place? 57% said yes, which is low. Let's be honest. We want to hear much higher numbers than that. So the lessons learned really from this project, preferred feedback output was the benchmarking seemed to have the biggest impact. It's okay showing the farms the result, but if they can't reference that to somebody else, or if they can't understand where the standard is, doesn't seem to have the same trigger of behavioral change, and that's why the benchmarking bar is so important. but the targeted advice, that knowledge exchange that's in the dashboard was really, really important. Positive changes have been implemented by the initial group of farms. It does work very well, this tool, as a bolt-on to an existing audit. So that was the farm quality assurance I showed you earlier. And that seems to be the key area for tools such as this. Key areas to improve across all data that we have. Soil health, especially phosphorus, is really high in the UK and Ireland. It is worrying that so many farms stated that the farm is not profitable without subsidy. And of course, the last one, the social side, is the work-life balance. So moving on from that, I do have just 2 slides left. So just moving away from the Feed Futures project, and I work on a European project with the acronym STEP UP, Sustainable Transition to Upgrade Policies for Livestock Production Systems. It's led by Teagasc in the Republic of Ireland. It's a really comprehensive project, but it is quite similar to Feed Futures in that it really focuses on high quality data collection, innovative farms and indicators and metrics, and LCA. So there's 6 key core work packages. Work package 4 is more the methodological side, focusing on LCA, including social LCA. And work package 5 is on optimal scenario modeling and simulation modeling. So just to flag that up really on the European side. And if you have any questions about Step Up, do get in touch with me, no problem at all. The final one is a UK-centered one, it's just called Transforming Land Use for Net Zero Nature and People, of which carbon is a big part of, at least soil organic carbon. I'm the lead researcher on the UK side for Lunds Hub. There are 4 key streams coming out of Lunds Hub: the Agile Policy Centre, the Net Zero Futures Platform, the Creative Methods Lab, and the Systems Viability Index. I focus on the Agile Policy Centre, which is effectively all the major UK universities working with UK government on a weekly basis. So that's what makes the Lunds Hub quite special. So what we do is we act as a rapid response team to key policy questions that DEFRA, or whatever the case may be, across the UK may have on a weekly basis. So it's really, really useful and quite unique. And no doubt very soon there'll be one focusing on soil carbon and sequestration and its role in the carbon market. So, Claudia, hopefully I have kept within time. I'm going to stop there and say thanks very much, and hopefully I get a chance to answer any questions.
Spot on. Ryan, thank you so much. I would say that this is the British punctuality. Is it? No, maybe not.
It is.
Thank you.
It is indeed. And the Irish.
And Irish, of course, of course. Thank you so much. It was really, really, really interesting projects. Ryan, if you allow me this time, I will start by our participants' questions because they are our priorities. So we need a little bit of clarification here, particularly in your sustainability performance. So the question is, can you explain a little bit more on how you determine this sustainability performance?
Yeah, absolutely. So each metric, what Fit Futures is effectively a calculator. That's what it is. So each metric has an ideal target. So it's a sustainability index, an ideal target. That target, for example, on pH, let's just take a basic example. That sustainability target for pH in grassland agriculture is between 6 and 7. That comes from the literature. That comes from science. So usually, like 90% of the time, you can derive from the science, you can derive from the literature what the primary sustainability target should be for your environmental or economic and social metrics. However, in some cases, that's not possible. The best example I can give you is energy. So what deems an energy efficient farm? That's not in the literature. And it's not clearly defined. So your sustainability target becomes an absolute nightmare. So what we did in some cases, and it's not just energy, is to take the best performing farms in the country, measure their energy efficiency ratio, find the average of that, and use that parameter as the target. So you're measured against the average of the best. And that seems to work well with similar tools across Europe. So the simple answer is the sustainability performance comes from the science.
Okay, but Yeah, but I would just add that your work in terms of working with farmers and co-creation has allowed you to reach this conclusion and to find a way to include what is very specific about these indicators for that specific region. That's very interesting. Thank you, Ryan.
No problem.
Another curiosity. So you pointed to a 29% score
Mm,
for economics. What
mm.
does this really mean? Is it good? Is it bad?
Yeah, no, well, it's the overall score. So that question would have came from the pie chart at the end. 29% for economics. It's an overall score of all the economic metrics. The main the main challenge that our farmers had was, even though net profit was mostly in the green, um, it was the productivity that they struggled on. So whether it be labor productivity, resource use efficiency, so production and productivity are different, and that's where
Hmm.
they were struggling. It was the efficiency that let them down.
Yeah.
So it was the mass amounts of environmental resources being used to get a small net margin increase, and that was the problem.
Okay.
So even though
And
they
and
looked like,
these for sorry to interrupt. And these
okay,
for the farmers who were already transitioning towards more sustainable practice, the practice that you were recommending.
yeah, exactly. But no, yeah, but remember what I just showed you was the baseline. So those results, 29% on economics for all farms and 34 on the environmental or whatever it was, that was the first measurement.
Okay, okay,
So
okay.
when we do them again, there should be, at least I hope,
Yeah.
an
We
improvement.
all hope
Yeah, exactly.
for an improvement. That's what we are here for, is to see improvements in terms of
Yeah.
the economics and particularly on productivity.
Yes.
Above all, thank you, Ryan. Another question, Ryan,
Mm,
some curiosity about the footprint calculator.
yeah.
So what footprint calculator do you use on your dairy farmers? You mentioned the carbon LCA footprint. So
Yeah. 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 It was an in-house carbon LCA that we used with our partners on the project, AFBI. So the Agri-Food and Biosciences Institute of Northern Ireland, AFBI, have their own in-house carbon LCA that we used. There has been in UK and in Irish research, there's been a shift more towards what's called AgriCalc, even from the AFB end, over the past couple of years. So we did use an in-house carbon LCA for the results that you were just shown, but we work a lot more closely now with AgriCalc, which is a spin-out organisation of Scotland's Rural College, SRUC, in Scotland. So that's the more prominent one now.
okay, okay, that's also interesting because we talk about a lot about carbon footprint and all these metrics, but we never delve into how they are actually calculated and what are the metrics and databases behind it. So thanks
Hmm.
for shedding some light. We need to move on. So Ryan, any tips on making the beef sector more profitable compared to dairy
Yeah,
in
yeah.
Ireland? Do you
Well,
think carbon credits might help?
as a beef farmer myself, or a part-time beef farmer, I would love to know the answer to that question. Um, do I think carbon credits can help? Of course they can. At least they should. I would just, I mean, the two most obvious concerns I have with carbon credits in the carbon market is a consistent MRV vehicle. That's the main one. I'm sure we'll hear about that in the next few presentations. The second one is the farmer actually getting the money that they deserve from the tariff itself. So there's a lot of middle people getting involved, threatening the sale of the credit to the farmer themselves. There's a lot of credits being lost from the sector, sold permanently, that cannot be brought back in. So I would say yes, absolutely they can help, but we need to be extremely careful as a sector and how we manage that. It's a very high level answer. Sorry, Claudia, but
Yes, I no, no, and it's fully aligned with the discussions we've been having throughout this series.
yeah, yeah,
We know this is work in progress. There's no yes or black or white answers. It's
yep,
still quite a lot of
yep,
progress to be made. We all want to believe that carbon credits are going to be one of the incentives for farmers to move to more sustainable practice, but we know we still have some way to go. I will take one more question. So, from working with your farmers, what positive change did farmers make to improve the sustainability of their systems?
What positive change did? Yeah. There's a couple of things, to be fair. A few of them did invest more in low emission slurry spreading techniques, but you have to keep in mind that whenever we were doing this work with these farms and we encourage them to invest more in low emission slurry spreading equipment, those things are really expensive, like really, really expensive to buy. But it did match well with a government grant that was coming in that subsidized that. There was also a huge increase in the soil sampling. I would call the soil sampling itself low-hanging fruit because it's quite cheap. If you ask me for what you get in return, that also was matched with a very unique program in Northern Ireland called the Soil Nutrient Health Program, which is a national funding program on soil health. £43 million paid by our government to sample every single field in the country, the first of its kind. So it's a beast. So the tool was, we were liaising and linking up with government and what they had to offer with programs and initiatives and subsidies and grants coming out, and making farmers aware that, okay, we're asking you to do this and we're asking you to do that, but you've got help here, which really worked well. And just on the last one, I would say pH. I just have to take that very quickly, but only in an Irish and UK context because of the issue we have.
Yes. Ryan, I put myself the clock here to stop you at 16:37. It's 16:37, so I really need to move on. But it was really, really nice. I hope we can continue these conversations in a near future. Very interesting. But we already have Shannon ready to jump to the stage, Shannon. So Shannon, she's agriculture, food and development economist at Queen's University, also Belfast, researching food and nutrition security, climate change mitigation, as well as sustainable livestock production food systems. Shannon has a PhD in agriculture economics, studying the effects of weather and climate shocks on food and nutrition security in Malawi. Currently, Shannon is working as a researcher at the Institute for Global Food Security on projects related to net zero livestock production systems. She's also experienced in designing carbon accounting tools for commercialization as part of the EIT Food Carbon Neutral project, as well as engaging with farmers on topics related to regenerative agriculture. And of course, she's one of our dear partners of the EIT Food Grow project. Shannon, it's a pleasure to have you here. I can see that you have a presentation ready. The floor is yours.
Perfect. Thanks very much. And thanks very much, Ryan. That was a really great presentation. So hopefully I can follow on. Yes, so it's really great to be here, and I'm delighted to speak about carbon markets and whether they are a farmer's friend or foe. So Claudia gave a good background to myself, so my name is Shannon McLaughlin and I work for Queen's University in Belfast, and I have a background in food science and nutrition and a PhD in agricultural economics. And I'm currently a research fellow within the Institute of Global Food Security. But most importantly, I'm soon to be married to a bee farmer in Northern Ireland, so well aware of the struggles and opportunities the farmers have in this region. So today I hope to give you an overview of carbon markets, as well as opportunities and limitations for European farmers. So without further ado, I'll dive right in. So when discussing carbon markets, I feel it's important to consider how carbon is measured. When I refer to carbon, I'm referring to carbon dioxide equivalents, which encompasses all three greenhouse gases, such as carbon dioxide, nitrous oxide, and methane. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, guidelines for measuring greenhouse gas inventories are seen globally as the gold standard method of carbon accounting. There are three levels or tiers of the methodology, which use respectively global, national, and farm level emission factors to calculate the greenhouse gas emissions. And as the tiers increase, the emission factors become more precise, and thus provide a more comprehensive method of measuring emissions. However, in addition to emissions factors, activity data on farming activities is also needed. So the IPCC methodology is used to calculate national greenhouse gas inventory and annual reports for each country. However, it's important to note that carbon sequestration is not currently included in this inventory report. Thus, at the national level, only gross greenhouse gas emissions are reported. And another method of environmental assessment is the life cycle assessment, which Ryan referred to, which among 15 other impact categories measures greenhouse gas emissions of a product from its raw material to its end of life. So the LCA approach relies on the use of databases of emission factors and activity data to calculate emissions. And while used readily, has not replaced the IPCC as the gold standard in terms of carbon reporting. And a final model I want to touch on is the Global Livestock Environmental Assessment Model, otherwise known as GLEAN, which combines the LCA approach and IPCC methodology to calculate greenhouse gas emissions of 11 livestock products at the global level. So Ryan referred to this as well. So how do we ensure standardization and consistency when we assess and measure greenhouse gas emissions? MRV, measure, report, and verification, is acknowledged by the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change as a method of measuring and monitoring reductions in greenhouse gas emissions at the national level. However, multiple MRV protocols exist, but for agriculture, the FAO's Global Soil Organic Carbon Map is one of the most significant. And in addition, the World Bank has its own MRV protocol. And in a bid to ensure standardization, the EU Communication on Sustainable Carbon Cycles outlines a framework in which CO2 removals can be verified and certified. But before I go into carbon markets, I also wanted to briefly cover the definition of net zero, which is a consideration of gross emissions, i.e. all carbon sources, notably methane emissions from enteric fermentation of ruminant livestock and nitrous oxide emissions from manure management. So as well as gross emissions, it's important to consider carbon sinks, which is carbon sequestration and storage. Sequestration refers to carbon dioxide removal via above ground biomass, such as hedges and trees, and storage refers to the storage of carbon via organic carbon in the soil. And carbon farming practices can be used to enhance the amount of carbon dioxide we can sequester and store. And these practices may include agroforestry, use of cover crops, no-till systems, and more efficient use of fertilizers, as well as rewetting peatlands and wetland areas. And to give an example of a grassland system, reduced stocking density of grazing animals can increase grass production and soil carbon sequestration. But furthermore, by incorporating agroforestry into the system, greenhouse gas emissions can be offset by 54% compared to the conventional farming system. And carbon farming is also an important part of the EU Green Deal, which mandates that 310 tonnes of carbon dioxide equivalents be removed from the land sector by 2030. So then let's get into carbon markets. These are trading systems in which carbon credits are sold and bought, and one tradable carbon credit equals to 1 tonne of carbon dioxide equivalents that are reduced, sequestered, or avoided. Credits are traded on a specific platform, which buyers and sellers exchange credits at market-determined prices. Those who buy carbon credits are usually entities that don't have the capacity, investment, or time to reduce their carbon footprint. Some of the other biggest players in the carbon market scene are also companies that want to stick to the corporate sustainability targets while also reducing their own carbon footprints from their own activities. Carbon credits can contribute to nationally determined contributions as mandated by the Paris Agreement, which are a country's greenhouse gas reduction efforts. Two types of carbon markets exist. Compliance markets are those that are set up as a result of a policy or a regulatory requirement by the government. And an example of this would be the EU's Emissions Trading Scheme, ETS. The compliance market aims to establish a carbon price by laws or regulations which control the supply of allowances that are then distributed by national, regional, and global regimes. This can be accomplished either through a carbon tax or a cap and trade scheme. And following the EU, China and India have also launched their own ETS and are now two of the biggest suppliers of carbon credits globally. And over 60 countries to date have implemented such mechanisms to meet their emission reduction targets. However, it's important to note that the EU ETS does not currently extend to the agricultural and fishery sectors. So while we have compliance markets, we also have voluntary markets, which function outside the compliance market and do not involve any direct government or regulatory oversight. However, they are still regulated. It's also important to note that there are 3 types of carbon offsets. These include removals, which is the process of removing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and locking it away. Avoid emissions, which refers to actions that prevents a carbon emitting activity from occurring, while emission reduction is an action that decreases the amount of greenhouse gas emissions compared to prior practices. So to delve a bit deeper into the compliance market, globally, many countries have an offset system, which reward farmers for carbon removals through sequestration and to some degree emission reductions. An example of this would be the USA. Offset systems are linked to national emission trading schemes in the USA or Canada, or regulated industries such as those in Australia. In both types of systems, regulated entities such as industries and energy producers buy carbon credits generated by farmers to offset their own emissions. And in countries with an ETS, farmers can sell carbon credits directly to regulated entities within their country's ETS. However, in Australia, farmers can sell their credits directly to the government. So to give an overview of how the European emissions trading system works, it is designed to reduce emissions in an economically efficient manner. The system operates on a cap and trade principle, where a cap or limit is set on the total amount of emissions that can be emitted by the covered sectors, i.e. the red line. And any emission allowances not used by emitter B in the blue can be sold or traded to emitter A in the orange. So to touch on the voluntary carbon markets, farmers can also sell their carbon credits on the voluntary market. In fact, in California, only 8% of credits are sold within the ETS, with the remainder sold on the voluntary market. And to give an example of the UK voluntary market, carbon prices are calculated using pending insurance unit prices and not through verified MR3 protocols. And these unit prices are based on anticipated delivery of emission reduction and not actual emission reductions in practice. And the price of these units range from 10 to 20 pounds per tonne of CO2e. However, it is estimated that heat and restoration in the UK will cost between 5 and 40 pounds, while reforestation is expected to cost between 65 and 100 per tonne of CO2 by 2035. So it is important to note that even though the VCMs are voluntary in nature, in the sense that farmers opt to participate, government monitoring and MRV rules still apply to ensure that the removed carbon emissions are additional, real, and can be verified. And the recently released State of the Voluntary Carbon Markets report in 2023 by Ecosystem Marketplace reveals a significant shift within the VCM. It identifies a substantial increase in carbon credit prices from 2021 to 2022, combined by a decline in the overall number of credits sold. So this shows a high demand towards high integrity and high quality voluntary carbon credits despite their higher price, thus offering co-benefits to farmers beyond mitigating greenhouse gas emissions. So in terms of legislation that governs voluntary markets, just in February of this year, the European Parliament and the Council of the EU reached a provisional agreement on a carbon removals and carbon farming regulation. So this regulation would see the establishment of the first EU-wide voluntary framework for certifying carbon removals, carbon farming, and carbon storage in products generated in Europe. So this regulation attempts to stimulate the generation of high-quality carbon credits by outlining a monitoring and reporting process for 4 carbon removal types, which would cover carbon farming, as well as soil emission reductions associated with carbon farming as well. I'll not go into these in too much detail, because I'm conscious of time. But as part of this framework, an MRV certification methodology would be developed. So another type of carbon financing is results-based carbon finance. So currently, approximately 95% of public climate finance is given before the outcomes of the project are known. So before it has been proven that the activity reduced, avoided, or removed greenhouse gas emissions. So outcome-based climate finance would be another approach that can be utilised to incentivise sustainable land use and food production at scale. This approach is dependent on the outcomes and pre-agreed greenhouse gas emission targets being achieved by the project being funded. So the greenhouse gas reductions must also be real and additional, meaning that they would not have occurred anyway if the project had not occurred. However, it's also important just to say that quantifying and verifying the achieved results of the project would depend on a consistent MRV protocol to ensure that on-farm carbon sequestration is being adequately assessed. So to give a couple of examples of companies that are selling carbon credits, so both international and European companies are offering farmers the ability to sell their carbon credits. I've given a few examples on this slide, but there are many, many more. But Agoro Carbon Alliance by Yara allows farmers to sell credits based on their ability to sequester carbon. In case study 1, a farmer with 202 hectares implementing cover cropping could receive just under 28,000 euros over 10 years, while a farmer with 1,014 hectares of irrigated land implementing cover cropping and reduced tillage could receive just under 187,000 euros over 10 years. And Cargill's Regen Connect program in the USA offers approximately 23 euros per tonne of CO2 sequestered per acre. And also to give a few arable case studies, the first of which is the company Bayer, who began a carbon credit scheme in 2020 and pay up to 22 euros per hectare over 10 years for climate smart farming practices. And Bayer's digital climate field view platform verifies remote sensing, satellite-based data, and whether the practices are being followed, and they also calculate carbon sequestration in this way. Soil Capita operates in the UK and Europe and is aimed at arable farmers with more than 100 hectares. They use the Cool Farm tool to calculate greenhouse gas emissions and sequestration, and carbon credits are issued at a minimum price of just under 27 euros per tonne of CO2e. And Norway pays farmers adopting regenerative farming practices such as minimal soil disturbance and cover cropping. They pay approximately 15 euros per tonne of CO2e removed. And this is verified by Comet Farm tool, which estimates greenhouse gas emissions, and the USDA also uses this tool. Indigo offers farmers up to $30 per acre over a 5-year period, and farmers can be paid up to 2 credits per year through sequestration or abatement, with the potential to sequester more using multiple carbon farming practices. And emissions are verified using the Indigo web platform and soil sample analysis. So just to briefly finish on the challenges. So there are also challenges with the implementation of carbon markets. The diagram on the right highlights a range of concerns, but there are also issues with permanence, which refers to the future re-release of stored carbon. As discussed before, lack of accurate and standard MRV protocols may limit the credibility of projects. We should also account for all greenhouse gas emissions, as it is necessary to understand the interconnectivity of CO2, nitrous oxide, and methane. The trade-offs should also be considered. On one hand, converting arable land to grassland or forestry could reduce production, but use of biochar may increase yields. Finally, it is important to note that carbon credits can only be used once, meaning that if sold, the carbon removed cannot count towards the farmer's efforts to reduce emissions. This also means that the agriculture sector isn't decarbonising if the credits are sold outside the sector. And I'll quickly flick on past this slide, but it was just to say that there are other opportunities beyond carbon with regards to the biodiversity credits market as well. And then top tips, just to summarise, if you are a farmer interested in selling carbon credits, ensure that whatever company you use has an MRV protocol and that the carbon credits produced by your farm are validated and verified. with a verifier who submits the results to carbon registry. Sell credits within the sector to ensure the agriculture sector is credited with the emission reductions or removals, or at least ensure that your farm is net zero before selling credits. Consider beyond carbon as there are other markets such as biodiversity and water quality. And as the diagram on the right shows, there are many things that a farmer needs to consider, so take time to weigh up the economic and environmental benefits when deciding to change systems or farming practices. Take it in stages and go field by field. But thank you very much for listening, and I'm happy to take questions.
Shannon, thank you so much for a very comprehensive presentation. You covered quite a lot of topics, so well done. You even had time to correct me that's about the offsets of agroforestry compared with the conventional practices. I mentioned 53%, you mentioned 54. I will take from you that you are right, so thank you for that. Shannon, you mentioned a very interesting tool, and it has not been widely mentioned, but it actually comes to address one of the problems of carbon credits, which is the results-based carbon finance. Can you delve a little bit into it? What is the stage? Are there companies operating on it? How does it work? How long normally are these result-based contracts, I would imagine? Can you tell us a little bit more about it?
Yeah, I can tell a bit more. I don't know a whole lot about it because my work is predominantly with the carbon markets and that sort of thing, like the cap and trade systems. But in a biodiversity context, there seems to be a lot of private organizations, such as banks, that are providing the funding for this, and they're doing so with this results-based approach. So it's ecologists coming together that really want to document and evidence that there are changes. But yeah, so it basically it's a new way of doing it. I can provide more additional links on it, but at the moment it is predominantly done via, as I said, 95% is done, without looking at the end result to see did the money given have the desired impact and results.
Okay,
I suppose that's called greenwashing. But so I think I think as a society we're clamping on things like this as well. So probably as we move forward, the results-based climate market will expand.
Okay,
Sorry,
so just to clarify, so what you are saying is that this results-based carbon finance will go beyond carbon and will start to include also biodiversity, and you also mentioned water management. So at the moment we don't have only results-based for carbon only. Am I right?
No, I don't think it's specific. It's just that they look at the outcome rather than just pay you the money. That I would say, Claudia, I'm going to reduce emissions by X, and you give me the money, and then they don't follow up. So I think it's just a different way of doing it. That predominantly it is done just here's the money, and that's just the way it goes. But there are other markets bringing up in biodiversity and water quality as well.
Okay.
But it's not the yeah, that makes sense.
Yes, it's clear. Thank you, Shannon. Shannon, there's also quite a lot of interest to know a little bit more about these companies that provide the certification to farmers. How can a farmer ensure that their carbon credits are registered, that they have a well monitoring and verification system in place? How can farmers be sure that these companies are serious?
Yeah, I think in the next webinar, there's a really good speaker, Andrew Voice from Soil Capital. He probably give more background on this, but I think when you're looking it up, I would look to see how are they calculating emissions? Are they using a carbon calculator, as Ryan referred to? Is it the IPCC regulated, ISO regulated as well? So I think a lot of this is actually on the company's websites. They show you that they are verifying emissions. They talk about MRV. So I think that from the start, and probably just to ask the company straight out, how do you measure these emissions?
Okay.
But I think most of them are using calculators, and a lot of them use satellite-based imagery to see if you are implementing the practices, which is very interesting to see as well.
Okay. Good. So, but it's good that you call our attention that it's definitely something that should be checked and investigated, because otherwise we are living just on promises and then they don't materialize. Shannon, one final question. I know that you have done some work on food security and climate change. Can you tell us from your research what is threatening food security from the climate change issues?
Yeah, I suppose in even not my PhD research, but even in my own local context, we've had so much flooding, so much rainfall, and that is affecting yields. That's going to affect the next yield. So it's quite scary to see that. So it's the changes in weather that people would thought, okay, when the rain comes down, I'll plant my seed then. And then spring came and nothing changed. And so there's going to be shortfalls definitely within the UK. So I suppose to flip that on its head, farmers becoming more resilient. So multi-species swards in areas with drought, they can be used to obtain the moisture in the soil and potentially for flood prevention as well. So sorry, just to flip that negative with a positive of when farmers increase their resilience, we probably can combat these changes in weather, temperature, rainfall that we're going to see more of.
That's a really good word, resilience. I think resilience is an important word for farmers. It's also a very important word for the agri-food sector that needs to ensure that a full stream of raw materials to enter their production. And then we as a consumers hope to have all the nutrients and all the products that we are expected, available as we always have. Shannon, it was a pleasure. I hope you can stay a little bit longer with us. We need to move on. Sorry for this. And we now have Alfred. So while Alfred prepares his presentation. So Alfred is an organic farmer and an entrepreneur from Austria. He leads the Grand Farm, which is a 90-hectare farm, which is beside producing food dedicated to research and demonstration. The focus is on soil health. We love this topic, Alfred, thank you. Agroforestry and market gardening. The Vermi-Grant nature product is producing organic fertilizer, soil amendments, and peat-free soil substrates. Alfred is a member of 4 EIP Agri focus groups, 4 EIP Agri operational groups, and 7 Horizon 2020 and Horizon Europe projects. Alfred is also co-author of the book Make Your Own Fertilizer, and in 2019 he was selected as a member of the first mission board for a soil deal for Europe. To let you know also that the Grand Farm is one of the 14 lighthouses farms at the global network of lighthouse farmers from Wageningen University, and also was just awarded ambassador for the EU mission Soil Deal for Europe. Alfred, it's a pleasure to have you here. I can see you have your presentation, and we look forward to hear your thoughts. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Claudia, for the nice introduction. Do you hear me and can you see my presentation?
We hear you and we can see your presentation. I cannot see you, but I can hear you and see your presentation.
Okay, perfect. So carbon credit, the good, the bad, and the ugly is the title. So you see there are different characteristics that I see from a farmer's perspective on the carbon credit. By the way, the picture shows some earthworm shit, to be honest, on a healthy soil here in Austria in a cover crop. And so let's go on. So what are carbon credits? What is the aim of carbon credits? And let me read this sentence. The primary aim of carbon credits is to reduce global greenhouse gas emissions by creating a financial incentive for emission reduction. So thanks to Shannon and Ryan, they already explained a lot about carbon credits, so we don't have to go into the depth anymore. So what are the methods and processes that can be used in agriculture? So on one side, the big thing everyone is talking about, how to sequester carbon in soil. So this is definitely the main thing, to sell carbon credits through carbon sequestration in your fields, in your soil, in your pastures, in your forest. The second thing could be carbon sequestration from plant biomass. So plant biomass that you remove from the field. For example, in Austria, there is a program, if you grow hemp and the hemp straw is removed, then you can collect, I think, even 250 euro per hectare or something like that. Maybe the number is not right, but this is what I have in mind. So why is this? Why can this be paid? Because you remove the carbon from the field and then you store it in the product. So for example, the hemp is converted into an isolation material, which is used in construction activities, and then it is stored there for decades. So it doesn't emit back as a carbon dioxide. If it would stay in the soil, then it would slowly be released, or parts of it would be slowly released as carbon dioxide back again when it is decomposed. But that doesn't happen because you remove it from the field and then you sequester it. Another way can be on-farm production of renewable energy. So you replace fossil fuel energy with renewable energy, and therefore you can also be paid with carbon credit. And as already mentioned by Shannon, the improved farm management. So what is the positive aspect? What is the good about carbon credit? And you see there is a smile with the good, so that's good. So there is, it's an important activity to save the climate. Definitely, it can make a huge impact if we store, for example, more carbon in the soil, if we sequester the more carbon in the soil for a long term. Then it's an additional income stream for farmers. Yes, it's also an incentive to switch to more regenerative practices, to convert the farm to regenerative practices, which is also good not only for carbon sequestration, but a lot of practices that are regenerative also at the same time help to create in general a better soil health, a better environment, and so this is also helps additionally. And it contributes definitely to soil health and the environment, because when you store carbon, when you sequester carbon in the soil, you increase your organic matter in the soil. That means that you can store more water, you can manage the water much better, you increase your soil aggregate stability, so water infiltration. We all know long droughts, heavy rains, and when the heavy rain comes, then it has to be stored in the water. It has to be infiltrated into the soil. It has to be stored in the soil. It has to be infiltrated into the soil, and it also helps to protect the environment. So these are all very good characteristics which are supported by carbon credits. So what are the disadvantages? What can happen? For example, and this was already mentioned by Shannon, greenwashing can be something. Then a big thing for farmers is that they are taking the risks and they are taking the initial costs. So they have to invest either in machinery or in compost, for example, to apply the compost on the farm. So they have to initially invest before they receive the money. And most often it's a more long-term approach. So you have to do it for 5 years to see an impact on the soil actually. And then there is the big risk that the farmers are taking the risks, because what you have to know is there is nearly no scientific evidence about the methods. So for example, it was mentioned by Shannon that cover crops implementation are considered as a carbon credit method. And then there is new research coming up which says, okay, cover crops do not contribute to carbon sequestration, really. And for me, this is a huge problem because as a farmer who is conducting cover cropping on the farm as much as possible, because I see all the benefits, but this research program was just focusing on the carbon side, but not on biodiversity impact of cover crops, not on water infiltration impacts on cover crops, not on soil erosion impacts on cover crops. So just taking one single characteristic out and saying, okay, cover crops do not contribute to carbon sequestration is a huge problem for me. And again, the farmers are taking the risks because, for example, we had that issue in Austria several times. Farmers started in a program, in a carbon credit program. After 5 years, they increased their carbon sequestration in the soil. They received some money. And after another 5 years, the company came back, or the agency came back and measured the carbon again. So then they lost some carbon, and then they have to pay back the money. This is a huge problem in my opinion, because as I already said, there is no scientific evidence. No scientist can really say this works in this particular farm, on this particular soil, in this particular climate. So farmers try to do something good, and at the end they might even have to pay back their money, the money after 10 years, because they lost some carbon again. And this will happen actually, because if you consider climate change, the soils will warm up. If they warm up, there is more microbial activity, so there is more carbon dioxide release, and the chance that you lose some carbon from the sequestration is quite high. So farmers are taking the risk. This is not something I really like. Another thing that is a bit of a problem is there is a lots of startup activity, consultants and free riders in the market that all consume, let's say, 25-30% of the credits, but they don't have any risk. The risk is always on the farmer's side. Another problem is the complexity in measuring real impact. So as I already explained, it's very complex, and it's in reality it's really difficult to measure, because we are talking about very little changes that, because of the large scale of the large fields, have an impact. But then just to measure this is really difficult. You always have to take from the same plot under same condition, and then even the measuring in the laboratory has to be on the same standard to really see if the organic matter content did increase from 2.3 to 2.4 or 2.5. I think you get the idea. Another thing is it's a long-term commitment. So as I already mentioned, 5 years, 10 years, and at the same time, it's a volatile market. So we really do not really know. The market carbon price should increase with time, but who knows if this really happen. My main point with the bad, and that is even the switching to the ugly, is that the discussion now is only about carbon. The emission trade system is only about carbon, and while all the other negative effects are not covered. So let's switch over to the ugly thing. When we talk about carbon credits, we only talk about carbon. So we don't even talk about soil health. We only talk about this one characteristic, that's the carbon. And the companies, the industry is only forced to talk about carbon credits. So they only have to pay for their carbon emission, and they don't have to pay for the damage they do to the environment, for the damage they do to biodiversity, for the damage they do to the water quality, water purity, and so on. So what we really need is a systemic approach. And so therefore, we need, beside of carbon credits, we also would need biodiversity credits, as already mentioned, soil health credits, because soil is much more than only carbon, water purity credits, air purity credits, social credits. So there is a lot which we could cover, or we have to cover, when we just think on the picture on the right side about the planetary boundaries. In comparison, we had 3 boundaries crossed in 2009, 4 in 2015, and now we already have 6 boundaries crossed. So thinking only about one single very little detail, the carbon, which is an important detail, no question about that, but it's still not enough. And finally, one thing that we have, for example, because we have a market garden, we have an organic farm, and we say the market gardening system touches 12 out of 17 sustainable development goals. So we do a lot of good things. We contribute positive to the environment, to biodiversity, to climate, and other things, to soil regeneration, water purification, air, clean air, and so on. And we are not getting paid for that, yeah, because we are getting paid for the vegetables. So we are not getting paid for these additional services that we do to the planet, to the climate, to the society. But on the other side, industrial agriculture does not have to pay for the damage they do. And just the last sentence, the German Ministry of Agriculture published a study where they say the economic value of the German agricultural sector is about 90 billion euro, but the damage they do to the environment is even higher. So that's all for now. I'm looking forward to questions. I try to stop the presentation. Let's see if I can manage.
You have managed to stop the presentation. Now we see each
Oh,
other
perfect.
on the screen. You can see. We are seeing ourselves in the. But anyway, Alfred, thank you so much for such an interesting overview. I know that you're very passionate about these topics, and you are really on the top of them, because you do produce, but you also do a lot of research and demonstration. So just to give a little bit more context to what you do, Alfred, could you start by sharing a little bit more what regenerative practice do you have, by giving also an idea of the crops that you work with, the area, just to put into perspective what Shannon just shared with us, more focused on livestock, grassland, and also bigger farm, which is the reality in Northern Ireland.
Okay. Yeah, so we are based in Austria, near Vienna, a very flat area, not the Austria you have in mind if you think about your holidays in the Alps. So we are a very flat area. We work on about 90 hectares, and it's an arable field farm. We have some grassland, some 9-hectare grassland for a few horses. We are an organic farm, and we have a research and demonstration farm. So our crop rotation, what we produce is 2 years of lucerne or alfalfa, which is a legume that fixes nitrogen for the next crop, which is winter wheat. Then we grow hemp, we grow corn, we grow soybeans, we grow lentils, we grow oat, we grow rye. So we try to be quite diverse in our crop rotation. We also have a market garden, as I already mentioned, which is 7,000 square meters of vegetable production. We grow summer and winter vegetable with 60 different crops and about 150 varieties. And we sell these market garden products like the vegetable, the herbs. We sell it directly to consumers in our region. The whole farm is a research and demonstration farm. So we do a lot of research with 3 pillars. One is soil health, one is agroforest, and market gardening. The methods that we apply is reduced tillage on the fields or minimum tillage. So in general, we try to till only 3 to 4 centimeter. We have to till because we have organic, so we have no pesticides to spray that we can use. We use crop rotation. We use cover crops as much as possible. We try to implement no-till, direct seeding. So now we start to roller crimper actions. Again, we did that already a few years ago. We have flower strips. We have agroforestry. Yeah, and we have market gardening.
Okay, thank you. Just to give a little bit more context where you are coming from. So I'll probably just open the discussion also to Shannon. We have here a question from the chat. Most farmers in Portugal are small with less than 5 hectares. Do you think it's worth to go through all this bureaucracy of engaging in carbon markets? And I think this is important because we have here different perspectives. I think the context here in Portugal is very different from the one in Ireland. The challenges are slightly different. We are definitely small, strongholds. So, what do you think, Shannon? Well, we'll start by you.
Yeah, well, I think it's worth it. If you don't want to engage in carbon credits, it's good to know what's in your soils and above ground. It's good to measure it. Even if you get a carbon tool online, just to start there, start small and see the benefits. I just think it's good to take soil samples, so I will give an example from the UK, but we do use soil samples to determine pH, what's needed, what fertilizer is needed, what lime is needed. So even to know what's in your soils, regardless of carbon credits, is important. So maybe you don't want to take the next step, but it's still good to know, go through the process, because there's different calculators though, and some are more intensive. So we start at the one that's less intensive and see how you get on. I still think it's important to know, even if you are a smallholder.
Yeah, thank you. And this leads to an interesting question. And Alfred, I would like to hear views on this, that we talk a lot about carbon, but we are actually doing some benefits to our practices that ultimately will lead to carbon credits. But we have kind of an intermediate stage where we have, healthier soils, more productive, more resilient systems. So shouldn't we be just focusing on that? What is your view, Alfred?
Yeah, we should. If our food gets the price, it should have, and it has the value too. But this is the problem that we have in the whole food system, that the food does not get the value, the monetary value, if you sell it. So therefore, we need to have additional credits coming from or additional service coming from the public sector at the end, because as I already said, as I already mentioned, the bad products don't have to pay for the damage that they do, but the good products and the good methods and the regenerative farmers are not paid for the service that they provide to the climate, to the planet, and to the society. And therefore, I say, yeah, we definitely should take this money if it's worth.
If it's worth. You're a little bit more skeptical about carbon credits being the only one financial mechanism, but for sure we need more incentives, or at least more compensation for these good practices. So Alfred, I know that you showed a skeptical approach to carbon credits. So from your experience and your perspective, where do you feel the agriculture should move forward towards this sustainability and eventually this resilience that we were discussing earlier? So what is the way forward if if carbon credits, they are, there's still a lot of issues that need to be solved before we are very confident about moving that direction.
Yeah, we could be that the CAP, the Common Agricultural Policy, which also provides a lot of support, financial support to EU farmers, should be converted in a kind of credit system where we can take all the aspects I already explained into account. Yeah, soil health in general, but also contribution to clean water bodies, contribution to less air pollution through pesticides, mineral fertilizers, and so on. So this could be part of an official EU-wide payment system that are credits which are beyond the carbon credits, so including the carbon, but beyond carbon, so also additional other characteristics.
Okay.
So this could be used, for example.
Okay, just picking on again on you, Alfred. From your conversations more at the policy level, do you see there is a gap between what policymakers are proposing and the reality of farmers at the ground level, or do you feel that it is a good alignment between the two of them?
I think there is still a big gap between politicians, also researchers and farmers, and there need to be much more talking, negotiating, but now I think there is a lot of listening to other sectors or other lobbyists than the farmers. So the industry has a big word to say, and they can also influence them heavily, because then they say, okay, if we don't get the best conditions, then we're losing labor places, so we're losing employees in the sector, and these are big arguments for the politicians, definitely.
Yes, good. Shannon, do you have any experience? Because I know that you also develop very interesting work, and you are close monitoring how this is developing. And I know that Northern Ireland is doing a great job, so quite ahead of the rest of Europe.
I'd say, just to touch on some of the other questions as well, a lot of farmers in Northern Ireland don't carbon benchmark. So we feel European. I think a lot of things are moving forward. Our government specifically is trying to get farmers to measure what's in their soils. But I do agree with Alfred that we're lagging in the research and in the politics, especially there's a question about can farmers sell biodiversity credits. I feel like there's no official system at the moment, but legislation will come, and at the moment it probably is the private companies looking to look good in their corporate sustainability. They're the ones buying up the the biodiversity credits. So I think we're moving and things are shifting, but we just need to increase the pace.
Yes, definitely. And I think it has been quite clear from our discussions here that we need very strong measurements about what we are talking here. And that's why here at Food for Sustainability, we are pushing soil microbiome analysis. We believe this is a great tool to do a baseline and measuring the improvement on the practices with real, concrete, objective measures in terms of what's happening at life in the soil. And we know that with this can function as a proxy for many other indicators such as nutrition, plant health, resilience, and really is one of the things we need to crack. Alfred, don't forget to share that paper, that article that you mentioned on cover crops. Today I also read an article saying that we need to be more careful about planting trees, because trees in terms of net emissions, they are positive when they are growing. We need to be more careful when they are more mature. So it's quite a lot of research, new ideas coming to the markets. We are approaching the end of this webinar. I just would like to ask our participants if you want to raise any last question to our dear speakers just before we close this webinar. So okay, Carolina asks if the recordings are available. Carolina, yes, everything is available for later viewing. You can join us. But from my end, it was really a pleasure. I think we leave bits and pieces about this huge puzzle that is the carbon markets. I think there was very interesting perspectives and ideas. So. If no more questions, we are on time. I'm being also very British in terms and Irish in terms of punctuality. So I would like to thank you for your participation. Our participants, to remind you that next week we will have Matthew Mall from the EU. We will also have Soy Capital, which is a company that works also with carbon credits, and we'll have Henrique Sequeira that is doing some measurements in terms of carbon in the soil, in the field. So again, we will be on a very interesting and continue this debate. So thank you all. Wish you a rest of good week, a nice weekend, and I hope to see you next Thursday. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.